Hello! You're listening to the Oklahoma Onstage podcast, the online source for all things theater in Oklahoma. We're glad you've joined us. We would love to hear your feedback, so drop us an email at oklahomaonstage@gmail.com or use the comment form on our website, which is oklahomaonstage.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe. Oh, and leave us a rating and review. It would really help us out. Now, sit back and relax. Another great episode starts right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Oklahoma Onstage. As always, I'm Tim. I'm your host. Some people make theater. Some people shape how theater is communicated. And our guest today has both. With 30 years in Tulsa's theater community and a career in journalism, PR, and marketing, he's a rare blend of artist and strategist. I used to be able to talk. Someone who understands not just how stories are told, but how they move people. From award-winning productions at Theater Tulsa to launching his very own Home of the Brave Productions, Jerrod's journey is a masterclass in creativity, leadership, and purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, Oklahoma Onstage family, please give a warm welcome with me to Jerrod Kopp. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Jerrod
Kopp.
I always try to ask that before I go on, and I miss it from time to time. So welcome to the show. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Tim. I really appreciate it.
So, as we do with everybody, we're going to do the same thing with you. How did you get started in theater?
I would say that took place in college.
Okay.
Before then, I was very interested in entertainment, specifically comedy. I was a comedy geek back in the day. Since I was a kid.
Okay.
We're talking like Mad Magazine, National Lampoon, SNL, old school SNL,
yeah.
Those guys. And from there, I didn't really see myself as getting into theater, but I really got looped into it in college. I was studying media, journalism, broadcasting, that sort of thing. And with that came certain classes that were given by the theater department, voice and diction, that sort of thing. And so I ended up having to take a couple of classes over at the theater department. And, I checked it out. And to be honest, the girls were very cute there. And I tried out for a play, and they were very welcoming. They got me convinced to try out for a play that was auditioning. I did. I got 3 roles in it, and that just kind of lit it from there. And that was in the early 90s, probably 89, 90.
Okay.
And that bug just bit me. And it never got away. So, I started out in acting and studied directing there, and found I was really, as an actor, I'm a much better director. And so, okay, as a performer, but I really got into the idea of storytelling through directing and being able to control so many aspects of the story itself, not just your singular performance, but everyone's arc of the performance.
Right.
The lights, the sound, the experience that the audience has. That's what really kind of enthralled me over time.
Yeah, of course. So you're Oklahoma born and raised?
Yes.
Okay. So you got your start in college. What was the first connection that you had with theater? What was the first show or?
It was a show called Road, which was about poor people living in a part of England, like lower class, blue collar workers, and their anger at their poverty and all that. And I had 2 small roles plus a larger one where I played a DJ that had a fairly decent couple of monologues, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. And from there, I just started making that part of my schedule. I would go out and audition for the shows, and I'd get cast in pretty regularly. And before long, I had taken so many theater classes that I pretty much qualified for a second major. So I ended up with a major in journalism, communications, and theater. And I thought at the time, in the 90s, well, I'm going to work in the media, I'll be a journalist. That's where I'll make my money.
Whereas,
Because, theater's not going to make the money, but, oh yeah, journalism will. Well, that's a sick joke. And so I found out pretty quickly when I got into journalism professionally, and lasted, a few years and got burned out, and immediately went, why am I chasing all of this? I'm spending all this energy in journalism and not making enough money to start a family. I've been married at the time for a year or so, and I made the jump over to advertising. I sold out, and it was actually one of the smartest things I ever did, because I was miserable in journalism.
yeah.
But I really took to advertising and marketing really quickly, and really enjoyed that space a lot more.
Okay, so you're in advertising and marketing. Um, what prompted you to make theater your career of choice?
Well, I'd done a few years in the corporate world and doing media training and communications for corporations and things like that, business communications. And again, I found a point where I was burned out, and I had been I've been working with various theater companies since I moved to Tulsa in the mid 90s. And by the 2000s, I was acting and directing here and there with various theater companies, just kind of wandering around, sampling. And I got locked into Theater Tulsa when there was a whole thing where it was about to shut down before its 90th season. And myself and my friend Sarah Phoenix kind of teamed up to revive it as a pair, and took over the board and kind of gave it a comeback just before its 90th season. And I had an opportunity a couple years into that, when they were hiring for a full-time executive director, that I got into that and took it over for about 9 or 10 years and ran the show, and got a whole different side of show business through the arts administration side, which is fascinating in its own right. And I did that for about 10 years. COVID was probably the turning point in 2020 and 2021. That was the most difficult time to be running a theater. And if you know, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of our biggest challenges was, we didn't have shows going on, so we didn't have revenue coming in. So I scraped together the money that we could, so that we could keep our team together, because we had like a married couple on our staff who, if they were laid off during that time, they would have nothing, no rent money, no grocery money, no health insurance anymore.
Absolutely.
And so I fought like hell to keep that team together, because I knew if they went and got other jobs, when we came back and reopened, they wouldn't come back. I mean, these jobs, I don't know if you know, in arts organizations, don't pay that well, and there's a lot of long hours and a lot of nights and weekends. And so yeah, they're tough jobs. You have to really be committed to the mission to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so yeah, we kept them on staff, didn't lay off or fire anybody for that period. And then coming out of COVID, when we reopened, we thought we'd be on a big upswing, but the audience was a lagging indicator there. They didn't come back immediately. And so we struggled with that for a long time. And there just came a point when I just said, after COVID, I can't do this anymore. And I talked to my board and said, I have 1 year left, and we have 1 season left, and then we have to do our succession planning and in that time. And so that's where I ended up with Travis Guillory, who's our now new executive director for the last 3 years, I think. And but that was a quite an experience, a real eye-opening experience, being able to produce shows, getting licensing and venues and all your people together and your staff. It was an incredible experience, very fulfilling. The stress of it after COVID just damn near killed me.
Sure. So when was it that you came to Theater Tulsa?
I had been doing shows with them just as an actor around the early 2000s.
Okay.
And then it was in 2012 when we took over the company and started our upswing again.
Okay.
So that was, 14 years ago now. That seems like forever ago.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I saw that 1,000-yard stare.
Oh, yeah.
From living to it.
So, let's see here. Looking back on that time that you were acting, looking back, when was it that you made that transition, or even necessarily made the transition, but really kind of drew? You said you felt like you were more of a director than an actor.
Mhm.
What was it that first pulled you from the stage to backstage?
I always had a thing for directing anyway, or at least I knew it was calling to me, even when I was a teenager.
Right.
Because I was growing up in a small town in western Oklahoma, and there wasn't much going on there except for the movies. And we had the only movie theater in the county. So people would come from all over the county to come and see. It was a very small town, and but this was in the '80s, so there was home video had just come out, and in this town, we had one video store, but every convenience store and drugstore and all these other places had a video section at the time where they'd rent out videos. So I had access to a lot of these movies, not just newer ones, more contemporary ones, but also a lot of classics. And I ended up watching anything and everything. And I became kind of a cinema guy, a movie guy. And I thought for a while that I might want to be a film director when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. And that never really panned out. But I found when I got into theater, I could take that same passion as a director and fulfill it in theater.
Okay, I like it. Um, so what you talked a little bit about, bringing it back to life. What did Theater Tulsa look like when you first stepped in here?
I was like in charge of it.
Yeah.
We didn't have any grants. We had no sponsorships. We had our subscriber base was about 35. And, back in the 60s, it was more like 7,000. And I think they had about $50 in the bank.
Oh, my goodness.
So it needed a rapid turnaround. And I remember Sarah had gone out and getting a lot of the money and the funding and really setting the standard for the quality we were going to have. And I was working on things like branding and marketing and getting an infrastructure in place for things like collecting donations and ticket sales and what our brand would be, because it was wide open because it had been so like disintegrated, I guess, in a sense. And a lot of people didn't want to work with Theater Tulsa anymore. We had to get back to the old people,
Right.
It was not in great shape.
Yeah. So were there problems when it led to this,
Well,
or was it just the
it had been a long kind of a decline over time, and we're talking a decline since probably the 70s. I mean, there was a period of, they had a peak in the 50s and 60s that by the 70s, their old building on 15th and Delaware had started to become run down. They decided to let it go and perform exclusively at the PAC. So they no longer had a building, which led to them being kind of scattered more and more. When I took over, we probably had 5 or 6 spaces that we were renting out of. We had our scene shop downtown, about a warehouse and 5 or 6 storage facilities for costumes. And we were borrowing an office from the landlord who sold us the scene shop. We were renting rehearsal spaces, plus the PAC venue. We were just scattered everywhere, so nomadic. And that was one thing that I managed to do during my time here was this building that we're sitting in now. I got us here my last year. We found this place, which was an abandoned Family Dollar, and put in new walls and converted the retail space into an art space. And it's so funny because we used to think at some point, our dream was to have a community center based around theater, which would be a place that we would have an office, some rehearsal space, maybe some studio space that you could have lessons, dance lessons, vocal lessons, that sort of thing. And, we thought it might be downtown and we'd team up with other theater companies and we get all this funding for it. And that didn't happen, but we got into this Family Dollar and converted it into what we could do as a community center.
Which is an amazing space.
Yeah, and that's why you see now, since that was my last year, and then Travis really took the lead his first year in refurbishing it and getting it performance ready, so that we could start doing not just our own performances, but open it up to other theater companies to do their performances here. And we've been rented out to dance classes and dance teams and vocal groups and other productions who want to do rehearsing here for, say, a month in the daytime. So it's been, I love the amount of use we're getting from it. And when I come by here now, as a guy who's no longer working here full time, and I see like they have their summer camp here and the kids are leaving, they have adults coming in for evening rehearsals and the place is packed with 75 to 100 people. I just get so thrilled that we did it. We got it here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the full dream, but we got pretty far down the road. And maybe one day we'll have the full on downtown community center. Who knows?
Still a dream.
But this is still, what we're doing here on Brookside, on Peoria, is very nice as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've seen a couple of shows here that have been put on by other companies, and the space is amazing. It's a great setup. It's amazing what you can do with a Family Dollar.
Yeah, it really is.
So as an executive director, during that time, as you said, all the problems when you took over to your last year, the pandemic, we'll say, what would you say were some of the biggest turning points for the organization?
I mean, one turning point was that first year, that 90th season, which was so funny because it was programmed to be like shows we can't screw up. Shows that people will see and we can't screw up. So the opening of the season was The Odd Couple.
Okay. Yeah.
Which did fine. We had Tuesdays with Maury in January. We did one musical, Oliver, which sold out its entire run because the stage was filled with kids.
Sure.
And then our one risky show was we did Boeing.
Okay.
This next part's Boeing. And I actually started, I was younger and thinner then, and I started as Bernard, the guy juggling these three stewardesses. And that was a blast. But that was one big turning point, was just getting the thing off the ground.
Yeah.
And just getting people to say, hey, we're not going anywhere yet.
Yeah.
We're not spam a lot. We're not dead yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a big turnaround. Another one was when I think it's so interesting because they're doing Les Miserables this season. And when we did Les Miserables in I think 2015, that was a turning point because I think a lot of people didn't expect that we would put on Les Mis to that level of quality.
Yeah.
And it was a blockbuster, it sold out every show, blah, 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 blah. But I think it changed people's perception of this local theater, this local community theater, what they can do. From then on, I think it was a lot easier to get people to come in for our musicals, to come in and work with us. It opened up a lot of doors, I think, because people saw where we were going.
So how did you get from scrounging there at the very beginning when you came on to the Les Mis of putting on this big Broadway-esque?
Calling in so many favors.
Okay.
And in terms of money and time and effort and please work with us and all of that. It took a lot of that,
Yeah.
And just a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
The people who were doing that full time, we're just busting our ass, in a big way, without a lot of resources. And I'm glad we have more resources now to support the staff that we didn't have back then. But it took a lot of grit and elbow grease and all the other cliches, if you can imagine.
Sure. So from a director's perspective, what's a production from your time as a director that you think has changed you the most?
Honestly, it's my current one.
Okay.
I'm directing The Diary of Anne Frank
Right.
as the first series of How We Have to Get Here. And what's getting me about it is what a human story it is.
Yes.
And how much what it has to say about humanity. And here's the thing. You're talking to a guy who I said was a comedy geek. Mm-hmm. And so my wheelhouse in terms of directing is the broad comedies. Sometimes they get they kind of push the limit of good taste. I've directed The Producers and Reefer Madness, the musical, and a lot of like really broad, funny shows.
Sure.
And I love a broad style of acting, that stuff that makes you, the belly busting style of comedy,
Yes.
The Mel Brooks type thing,
Oh, yeah.
The real hard stuff. Something makes you laugh really hard. And so now I'm switching gears to do a Holocaust drama. And you would think that would be really weird, but I've taken to it really in a way that I'm even surprising myself.
Yeah.
And I think it's finding the humanity in the piece and really locking into it, which I can talk more about when you want to get to that. But there's a lot more details to that about how I discovered about that show and about the material and what it means to me.
So when you took over as executive director, what did the history of Theater Tulsa mean to you?
it meant that we were nearing our 100th season, which I was in charge when we did that. And I had a legacy to carry on that we couldn't let die out. And that to me has always been my North Star, is that it's not about me, it's not about you or anybody else. It's about this organization and doing what's best for the organization and carrying on the legacy that was started back in 1922.
Okay. So as a director, you touched a little bit on this with the Diary of Anne Frank, but tell us a little bit about your directing philosophy. How do you get into the meat of a story?
One of the main things I've been doing as I've directed more shows is to be a lot more inclusive of everybody that is on stage or in the cast. And by that I mean, normally, specifically in a musical, you tend to spend a lot more time on your leads, then you're supporting, then you're featured, and then your ensemble. And I used to really push the ensemble. I used to tell them when I direct larger shows that, hey, the leads are telling the story, but you guys are giving us the world. They're building the story, you're building the world of the story. And so I've found that when you look at it from a personal perspective, I mean, everybody's performance has something to say in the piece. I don't believe in warm bodies. Everybody's got a job to do. Everybody has a role to play in this story.
Absolutely.
And it's an important one. And it may not be the lead who gets all the lines, but I've got one guy in the Diary of Anne Frank who has 0 lines, but he is the villain of the piece. He's a Dutch collaborator. And I'm going to make him a real bastard. People are not going to like this guy when they finish the show.
Right.
But he has no lines, but he's going to make an impact in terms of who these people are who would sell out the Franks.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you've directed some award-winning productions.
Local awards.
No, hey, awards. I mean, recognitions,
yes,
right?
Yes.
The 39 Steps, a good one. Peter and the Starcatcher, the producers, as you mentioned, Little Shop of Horrors, Reefer Madness, and most recently, The Play That Goes Wrong.
Yeah.
Which again, very fun, like you said.
That was a very fun show.
Very fun, very funny.
Mm-hmm.
I just the British humor, the dry British humor that just rolls through that is just amazing.
Well, and that one, it was interesting to me because I actually directed that as an inclusive comedy. I wanted to be fully inclusive, and by that I meant that not just that everybody had a role to play and everybody had something important to add to the comedy, but that we did a style of comedy that was meant to be just very wide to everyone. I wanted to be something you could bring your grandkids to, you could bring children to, and you would it wouldn't be just inoffensive, but it would be something you could get and laugh hard at. So I remember bringing in a guy who does ASL, sign language, and had him watch with me one rehearsal so he could give him some ideas on how to make some of the joke deliveries more visual.
Okay.
Rather than just verbal.
Right.
I brought in this Latino woman who's a friend of mine, and we talked about if someone doesn't speak the language, how can we get this point across to someone who may not speak English as a first language. So I intended it to be something that was a wide-ranging, inclusive, and this is actually at a time when DEI and inclusivity was being treated as a dirty word, and I was actually doing a refutation to that by saying, no. Inclusivity is actually where you get your power.
Sure.
And that was the power of that piece, that we made it so inclusive to everybody to enjoy it. And this was in, March of 24, I think. So it was an election year, and everybody was at each other's throats. You remember. And this was a chance for everybody to just get into a room. And we sold out nearly every performance and put 400 people into a room and forget all the other stuff from the outside world and just laugh.
Yeah.
Something that everybody can laugh at, everybody can understand and get and enjoy.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of that approach to the comedy, an inclusive comedy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I think that for lack of a better word, political storytelling, it has its place and stuff. But I think at times we do need to just go to theater to escape, to get away. And like you said, to laugh.
And theater can do all of those things.
Absolutely.
It can do any of those things.
So, how do you go about choosing a project to work on?
Well, that's a good question. Because when I was programming, it was mostly, a butts and seats philosophy. What will get us the most butts and seats, or what is going to be most relevant? What is going to get people's attention? It might be something that just came off Broadway, or something that just won a Tony in a rival, or something that's just new that I thought that our audiences would like. In terms of what I choose, in terms of what I want to direct,
Mhm.
um, you know, that's that's a good question. I don't know that I have a philosophy per se in terms of I was always drawn to comedies,
Mhm.
but as I've matured in age and as a director, I find myself drawn to all, just more dramatic pieces because I feel like I've got a little more um, control now of the experience for the audience.
Okay.
When you're starting as a director, you're very much, how do I put this up? What is the blocking going to be like? What are the line readings going to be like? And I look so far beyond that now with, when the audience comes in, what do they see? What are we going to hit them with? What are they going to feel in this part?
Yeah.
And how do we communicate that this moment has just happened? A rat is a part of my play. A rat runs across the stage. Well, we're not going to have like a little robot rat. We're just going to have a sound of a rat, but how do we sell that?
Yeah.
The actors with the sound, with whatever. It's all a big challenge that I've really been enjoying.
Yeah. I think a lot of things, people can get too wrapped up in tech
Mm-hmm.
with theater and almost make it a Hollywood production. But I think tech has a place to, especially nowadays, as all the advancements in technology,
Mm-hmm.
that there's so many things that we can do to help with those stories. I've seen some of the shows that even Broadway World is putting out, videos and stuff of, the animatronic horses,
Mm-hmm.
all of this other stuff that's on stage now that we couldn't do, 10 years ago,
Right.
things like that. So I think it's great that we're doing that. So how do you balance comedy, chaos, and precision, especially in a show like The Play That Goes Wrong?
Um, well, I remember approaching that show as the comedy is going to be there. The comedy's baked in. All you got to do is add water, right? You got to just add a great cast, which we had. So we had actually rented a set from another company, or we bought the set from a company that had just done it
Okay.
just a couple of months prior and had it shipped over to us. And so we knew what the set was going to be. And I had a video of their work. And I said, well, here's what the blocking is going to be, because on this line, this water has to come out here.
Sure.
So you're going to be in this corner.
Absolutely.
And over here, so I basically said, watch the video, know where you're going to be at these comic moments, because this is where the set's going to do that. And then, and learn your lines. And I pushed them so hard to learn your lines so fast that once we learned the lines and the blocking, very quick, like I front loaded it in the first 2 weeks. We had about another 2 or 3 weeks to just what I was calling comedy jazz, and just say the lines and see what moment comes up out of that. When this happens, and I was telling them, you got to think about the thing that happens. The thing that goes wrong is not funny. A thing falls off a wall. That's mildly funny. What's funny is A, your reaction to it,
Yep.
and B, when you try to cover it up as if it never happened.
Yeah.
And that's what we would go through, is things would go wrong, and we would try to find places where, what is my reaction to it? How do I try to act like it never happened? And that became this little fusion where we were bouncing off each other like particles to make that comedy happen. And there were bits that came out of it that I've seen other productions here and there. There's a lot of high school productions that are on YouTube.
Yeah.
But we found so many things that were not in the original script. They were in between the lines,
Yeah.
just reactions,
Sure.
and and new strategies to cover up the things that went wrong. And I remember just being so amazed at what we were making by 2 weeks in of just playing around with the material with no books. We have found a really funny show, and it wasn't even up yet, and then of course by the time we brought it in, it was in really solid shape.
Good.
One of the things I was proudest of with that show was that we actually opened on March 13th, I think it was. No, it's March 21st, and that was also National Down Syndrome Day. And we did our matinee. We did a matinee that day and dedicated it to National Down, or it was a Worldwide Down Syndrome Day, where we reached out to Down syndrome support communities and let them come in, bring your child or your person in your family with Down syndrome, and they get it for free, and they'll get like a concession and all that. We had a group, a woman who works with us, Haley Job, who has a brother, Clark, who has Down syndrome, and they were performing karaoke songs together in the lobby. Like it is a day about the worth and dignity of people who are born with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And it just lined up well on that. And that goes back to my inclusive thing. I wanted something that, even people who sometimes you think, well, can I take them to this movie or that? Will they understand it? I want it to be something that everybody can understand and laugh really hard at.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really good. So you built a whole career from beginning until now based around how messages move people.
Yes, that's a pretty fair assessment. Yeah.
How does your communication background influence your leadership or your directing?
Honestly, it's the other way around.
Okay.
I would say my theater work influences my professional work more than vice versa.
Okay.
And I say that because with theater, you're using, it's basically a multimedia experience, not just with live actors, but with lights and sound and other things, and movement and rhythm, rising and falling, dramatic tension throughout the story. All of those things to persuade people to feel a certain way or to think a certain way about what you're doing. And that has informed my work on the professional side more than anything, because the real persuasion takes place in theater, not necessarily in marketing. But I use the same tools, the same basic tools to do things like get people's attention, get their interest, and convince them of whatever message I'm trying to say, which is maybe this brand is solid, or this brand is worth working with,
right,
or this is a fair price for this product, or this product will change your life in this way, and it's worth it. All those messages come through with the tools that I picked up through theater.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. So how do you think, and with all of that being said, how do you think that theater organizations can better communicate their value to the public?
When it comes to, I have this work in community theater. For me, it's really about getting your community theater plugged into the community, so that when the hard times come, and you're low on money, or you get hit with a COVID, or some sort of a national disaster, or your costume shop burns up, God forbid, because that's happened in other theater companies.
Yeah.
Where something catches on fire. And, in those cases, it's like you need the community to come back to you and rally around you.
Absolutely.
And if you're this shining theater on top of a hill that nobody can access, you're not going to have that same support.
Right.
You got to get out and get into your community and build a safe place for everyone to come in and feel like they belong, and that they can contribute, and that they're doing something about, they're spending their time in a valuable way.
Right.
And when you provide that, I think that's the thing that will make you a star in your community.
I couldn't agree more. So, looking at the marketing side of things, and then the community aspect that you're just talking about, let's talk to us a little bit about the relationship between Theater Tulsa and the TPAC. How did that come about?
Well, that really started when the TPAC first opened up in the 70s. Because, as I said, there was a confluence of Theater Tulsa's old Delaware Playhouse was on the decline, and it was getting to a point where it was like going to be too expensive to get it up to code, essentially. It had been there for a few decades, I think. And so they decided to get out of that space and produce exclusively their performances at the PAC. And that was just a really big change in business model, because, you don't have to maintain the space. The operations costs are not there, but they kind of are there when you're in the space, because you're paying for all of that while you're renting it. And, those prices will go up and up, but that's just the nature of it. Right now, we were kind of chained to this TPAC because we didn't have a space. Now we have this space, and it allows us to have a little more freedom in terms of the programming that we do, because the programming we had to do at the TPAC was not like a small show. Like, you wouldn't see something like Title Show or some little four-man piece, we had to go with the Les Miserables, the Waitress, the big shows,
Absolutely.
which are, a bigger payoff, but also a much bigger risk. And, we've had some shows that we put a lot of effort into and money, thought it was going to be a great hit, and it just fizzled at the box office, and that hurts.
Absolutely.
That hurts your bottom line, it hurts your wallet, it hurts your soul, And so this has allowed Theater Tulsa, I think, to diversify its programming and diversify the style of work that it does so that it can produce things in a smaller space and then save the really big shows for the big house. Right. And I don't know if you know this, but the TPAC is going under a lot of renovations that they've been raising money for, starting in like 2028 for the next 2 to 4 years. And that was another reason when they started talking about it coming out of COVID, I was like, I can't solve that. I don't have the brain power or the energy to figure out what we're going to do when the TPAC is not even an option for full.
They're going to shut the doors when they do that. Okay.
Yes. And so that was the other thing that made me go, it's time, Jerrod.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so now we have a thing where, we do the big shows there at TPAC. We do the smaller shows here. I think it's given a great place for a lot of other companies that maybe couldn't afford the TPAC to also have a solid place that they could come and perform here. So, yeah, I'm, very, very proud of the work that's been done since I left, that this team has done with Travis and Mandy and Fletcher and the staff have done phenomenal work in just getting this place into a new option for the community.
Yeah. And I think that's great, having a place where these smaller startup companies, which more and more are popping up all the time, but having a place where they can come and it's already established and they can show off their talents and their wares and still be able to put on a quality production,
Yeah.
I think that's really, really good. So you left Theater Tulsa. Did you immediately think you were going to start your own thing, or?
No. What I did was I took a mental vacation from it for probably 6 months. And by 2025, I started reading. I was kind of distressed at this. I'll put it this way. This is what I tell people. I'm so thrilled with my personal life, my family life, my professional life right now. But the state of the world and the country and our state has given me so much anxiety.
Yeah.
Just as a guy who follows politics, that follows geopolitics. And I found myself really freaking out when Project 2025 was being enacted, and just the way they said it was going to be. And these cuts are happening, and U.S. aid is being chopped off, and children are dying in Africa. And I found myself reading a lot of political plays to kind of as a balm, to look. And I was looking at it more like I was processing it, what was happening by reading these plays. And what I found pretty soon was that this was actually very soothing to me to read plays from governments and countries and time periods that no longer exist in that way. So they were writing about fascism, authoritarian governments, the collapse of their institutions, human rights violations, and it wasn't sustainable. None of it's ever been sustainable. And so what we can see now is that there's an end to this, and it just seems like it's never going to end because we are in the middle of it. It's the first time we as Americans have experienced a society happening like this. And so, I don't know, I found myself over the first 6 months of 2025, reading all these plays like The Diary of Anne Frank and The Trial and It Can't Happen Here. And I found myself going, somebody should do these, just all of them, and I pitched this idea by June, July of last year to Travis, and I put together this idea on how the F would we get here, which is a theatrical saga explaining a lot of the themes that brought us here. And his first response was, well, this is too hot for one company, too hot for one brand, but we do want to participate. And so he kind of took Diary of Anne Frank, and I went, that's a great idea. We'll shop it around. And so I started shopping around to World Stage and Theater North and the Shakespeare Company, Pembroke Players, Riff Raff, and just reaching out to all my friends who are running their own theater companies and have done directing and producing. And a lot of them said, yeah, I want to be involved in that. So we started getting verbal commitments, pledges on time periods, and realized it was going to be a kind of an epic thing. This isn't a 1 year project. This is more like a 3 to 5 year project, and maybe beyond, depending on how far we want to take it. But yeah, it's been. I found that it helped me cope in a certain way, and that I felt like I could help others cope if they start to understand the machinations that happen behind all of these sudden changes that we're experiencing now.
Okay.
And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling right now is it seems like things were going on a certain way, and then in 2025 we just did a whiplash change into this new world, this new American life,
Yeah.
of authoritarianism, and that's how it was planned. It's kind of a blitzkrieg to kind of knock us into shock and not respond. But I find that to cope, you got to do what you can do for yourself.
Sure.
For me, I found it in art,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of other people will find a little safe place in art too to really think about
Right.
what's been going on here.
Right. So you said this is a multi-year saga. You're doing one show a year?
No, doing multiple shows a year.
Okay.
So I'm looking at 3 or 4. I've got 2 booked for this year, which is the Diary of Anne Frank,
Mhm.
and then with World Stage Theater Company, we're doing 1984 in May.
Okay.
I'm working up a fundraiser, which I can't announce yet because I don't have a venue.
Okay.
So until I get the venue, I'm not going to license it.
Sure.
But we're looking at that for March, for International Women's Day specifically.
Okay.
And I've got another one cooking up for summer and fall of 2027.
Okay.
So they're kind of like in seasons, but there'll be about 3 a year, I think, 3 to 4.
Okay. And so the interesting thing that a lot of people don't know about this is with Home of the Brave Productions, when you came up with this idea for how the F did we get here,
Mhm.
this was, as you were saying, a collaboration between a bunch of different. What, he's 13? Was that
Something like that. Yeah, I reached out to about at least a dozen theater companies, and got either yes, let's book it, or yes, I want to do this, but sometime in the future. And I said, you have 3 to 5 years. It's fine. We don't have to commit you
Sure.
immediately. Or some saying, I'm not ready for it now, but let's talk in a couple of years, couple of seasons. And that's kind of where I am. Nobody really said, no, I can't. I'm not going to do that whatsoever.
Right.
I think everybody really got it, what we were trying to say with it. So, what's interesting is I started with theater companies and then realized this doesn't have to be just people seeing shows.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't have to be just theater based. And I started opening up to a wider arts community. So I went to Circle Cinema
Okay.
and spoke with their programming guy about how we can do some supplemental screenings in line with some of these shows. For instance, we just worked up one that we're about to announce, which is the week that Anne Frank opens on August 12th. We're doing a screening of Freedom Writers, which is one of these urban teacher dramas where Hilary Swank plays this first-year teacher who uses the Diary of Anne Frank to kind of and journaling to get through to her kids, and it helps break their racial and gang divisions in their classroom and in their school. But they use the work of Anne Frank as well as Meek Giles, who helped hide them.
Mhm.
This is a true story, by the way. They brought her in from Europe to come speak to the kids,
Oh, very nice.
and it's a heartwarming, how do I reach these kids type
Yeah.
story. But it uses very much the work of Anne Frank, her diary, and the idea of journaling, and how it provides perspective to you and your own world, so that you can improve yourself, basically.
So you said you were reading all these stories. You had a bank to choose from. How did you choose the Diary of Anne Frank as the first one?
It's one of the most obvious, and it's in terms of the subject matter and the title. It's such a well-known title, and I think that's what really gravitated Theater Tulsa to it in the first place. Was I think they were thinking of it anyway, and so there was just a little bit of an overlap there on that piece. And so it was a great reason to start too, a great title to start with, because I think a lot of people would get it. And then when they see what we have planned for this, which there's, we're doing a partnership with the Sherwin-Williams Museum of Jewish Art to do a side exhibit about Anne Frank with some of their materials from the museum to be here in the lobby.
Okay.
And then, between that and the partnership with Circle Cinema to do the screening, we're bringing together about 3 or 4 different organizations to talk about this particular story. And it's, directed around the last 2 weekends of August. That's when the run of the show is. But we've dialed in all of these organizations to kind of come in and talk about this one thing for our audience to really help understand them. And this one in particular, Anne Frank, is a story of the theme that I'm bringing up a lot is dehumanization. And, I called it a Holocaust drama before, but I don't think it's necessarily, the story I'm telling is not focused solely on the larger Holocaust. That is something that's happening outside of the room where these people are existing. What's happening around them is this process of dehumanization where the German government had classified them as an other, Jewish people as an other. And they did this with others too, political dissidents, people of color, queer and homosexual people. All of them were an other and were dehumanized and were branded, with stars or a pink triangle. They were drawn together into concentration camps, and they were written out of the protection of the law. And by writing them out of protection under the law, they were also written out of their community's moral protection as well. And it became, we can do whatever we want to these people because they're not even people. They're vermin. They're subhuman.
Right.
And so that to me was the theme that really called to me when I read this new version of The Diary of Anne Frank, was that it's very much about how these people were dehumanized. And I wanted to refute that by putting people on stage who were the very opposite of that. They were extremely human, full of life, and deserved to live. And so that's what we came up with in this black box space, was that this is not a presentational version of The Diary of Anne Frank. We're actually doing it with a thrust environment. And so it's not quite immersive, but it's very intimately staged so that you, the audience, are sharing the annex with the Franks and the Von Dons. And you're going to be experiencing their trials and tribulations in real time with them. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Very nice. So bringing all these shows together and all of these theaters together, what is the end goal? What is your purpose behind this?
I would say, first of all, I would like people to understand the answer to the question, how did we get here? And it's a lot of things. That is a very thick stew that includes things like, cultism, television, lead poisoning, authoritarianism, organized religion. I mean, there's a lot of things that contributed to this. And what I find interesting is that I think Oklahoma is uniquely situated as the crossroads for a lot of that. When I say it's a stew, I mean we are the cauldron that is cooking it all up. And I think we're kind of leading the country in that way. And you can see it in our election results. They don't even wait past 5 minutes after the polls close to say, called for Donald Trump, because 85% of all the counties voted that way. It's pretty obvious. So yeah, there's, I want people to kind of understand a lot of things that went into that. So the shows themselves are based on certain themes that I want people to understand on a human and empathetic level. Like I said, The Diary of Anne Frank is about dehumanization. Mm-hmm. I plan to do 1984 in spring about high control groups, from which you get things like cult thinking, mm-hmm. Loyalty to an organization, whether that's should be a church, a cult, a political party, anything that convinces you that to take information from them as the truth and nothing else. Mm-hmm. No matter what the facts say, no matter what the world says, no matter what reality says. And they're all along themes like that. I'm presenting it as here's a thing you should know about, uh, a concept, if you will, that brought us to this point. And so, and the other shows are along the same line: appeasement in the face of evil, that sort of thing. So that's what I want people to ultimately understand is to know the concepts that I'm basing these on, as well as walk away with a true emotional understanding of what it would mean to them if they went through that. Because other people are going through it.
Yeah.
I need people to understand, if that were me, this is the situation I would be in. Yeah, I think theater is a huge empathy machine. Movies are that way too, but theater especially, because you're in the same room,
You're there
with live performance, and you can see it and experience it in real time, without edits or anything that distances you, with computer graphics and all that sort of stuff.
So what does it mean to you that all of these other theater companies are getting on board and want to be a part of this project?
It's very gratifying to know that, like you said, like we talked about earlier, there used to be a lot of competition in this market, and to be able to go to all of these friends and peers that I have throughout this community and say, we should, we've talked for years about collaborating on something, doing something as a community that collaborates and does something with one voice. Well, here it is. Here's an opportunity to do it. Let's go with it. And so, and the fact they've been very open to it has been so gratifying, that I can reach out and count on each other to say this is important to us, and they all agree that this is what art is all about. This is why art matters in people's lives.
Right.
We're going to take on something that is that seems much larger than us, and we're going to distill it into events and experiences that will help you understand what's happening in our world in a way that you will not get from reading a newspaper or from getting on Twitter X or social media or anything like that.
Right. Very cool. So transitioning just a little bit to looking to the future. Okay, this is where we are now. What is your long-term vision for Home of the Brave?
My hope is that we would keep doing events that will highlight the three themes that I wanted to bring about in my original vision, which is themes of political power, human rights, and the importance of civil liberties. And as long as I can keep talking about that here in Oklahoma, I plan to keep going down that path. And my long-term vision would be to be not just theater shows, although that's been that's been my hook so far.
Sure.
But to include things like, more book readings, theater screenings, musical events, that sort of thing. I've got word out to some other arts organizations that are not theater based, that I want to start including in this as well, as supplements or as their own individual events for what we're trying to say here.
Right. Okay. What do you think the future of Tulsa theater looks like to you?
Well, if I could predict that, I'd still be here.
Oh, yeah.
I started here with that playbook,
Right, yeah.
cashing it in. Well, let me see. I'm encouraged by the fact that we have a lot of theater happening here, because we did not. When I first started, there was a lot of offshoot companies that were mad at other companies, so they were starting their own offshoots. They're all doing small plays because they couldn't afford the big musicals, and the quality was just kind of all over the place. And what I'm seeing now is people are doing their own projects, not like here and in other places, not because of a spirit of revenge or I'm going to attack this other company, but it's more of a spirit of collaboration, which I find very, very encouraging, because I think if we as an arts community are going to survive in Oklahoma, in deep red state Oklahoma, we have to stick together.
Yeah.
We have to look at each other as allies and not enemies or frenemies, or anything like that.
Sure.
So that's what I find most encouraging, is I would love to see this space continue to grow into into making that community center that we talked about. I am very encouraged by what the PAC has planned with their renovations.
Mhm.
I mean, they need it. if they're going to play in that space and be a major like regional draw for touring productions and big events, they have to. I mean, that's the ball game they're in.
Yeah.
That's the league they're in, and so yeah, they badly need those. As someone who's been backstage there and been through the catacombs of the space, yeah, they need a lot of repair and upkeep and a lot of things. And but yeah, that's kind of where I see that happening. And I hope Maybelle Wallace is still with us, who still runs Theater North, because she's been around since the '70s doing her thing, and she's like a legend.
Okay. So you talked about after the pandemic that you were just, I can't.
I wasn't burned out, but I was gonna be.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I can't let myself burn out and drag this whole organization down when that happens.
Sure.
So I got ahead of it and said, I'm on the verge. So let's pull the trigger now before, it just gets bad.
Yeah. So after that, your project now and everything else that's going on, what keeps you excited about Oklahoma theater after 30 years in the craft?
The fight to keep it alive.
Okay.
There's a lot of communities around the country that are theater towns, and they support their theaters, and like public dollars and private dollars. And you don't see that much here. It's pretty much ticket sales, and favors. But it's a tough fight, but it's the right fight. It's good for us to have this kind of work here. And we would miss it badly if it were to go away.
Absolutely.
We'd miss it terribly. The quality of life here, if our arts were to go away, I don't like to think about it, but most people aren't even aware of it. That it would be devastating to us and our identity as Tulsa.
Yeah.
Oklahoma City kind of turned itself into a sports place, and Tulsa has kind of a rep as being an arts place,
right?
With our music scene and our theater scene. It's just, it's. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but
that's great. I agree with you. I think now we are in a position where more movies and things are being done here, produced here, created here. And I think without the theater culture at the foundation of that, I think we would see that die as well.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have actors to draw from, why come here?
Right.
And I think for Hollywood and everything, I think that was one of the draws. It was a virtually untapped resource as far as visual, but it also had untapped resource as far as people, talented people. So I think,
and production people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Techs as well. So as we come to an end of our time here, one of the things that I do at the end of every one of our episodes, we have what we call our casting call curveballs. And so, or not casting call, sorry, curtain call curveball, because it's the end, curtain call. And so I have a series of questions that are literally just random, off the top of your head type questions, maybe about theater, may not be about theater.
Okay.
Just to kind of, after we've been talking about all of this stuff and everything else, kind of rattling your brain, now you can't hardly think of anything. So these kind of just things that are just off the top of your head. So that's how we want you to answer them, just the first thing that pops in. So what's a show that you direct every year if you could?
Actually, The Play That Goes Wrong. And I say that because I think that show could play not every year, but on a 2-year basis.
Okay.
How people do Christmas Carol every year?
Oh, yeah.
I think a show like The Play That Goes Wrong can play in a political year, every political year. And if you do it in the style that I mentioned, which is forget your worries, forget your troubles, and come and laugh for a while, I think it could be a comedy concert, in a sense, that you would do around October, November of every election year, and you would have a huge hit because people are sick of hearing what they're seeing on TV and the radio and in discussion on the water cooler. I think that show would be a huge hit every election year.
Very good.
And I would love to direct it again.
Okay.
because I know so many things that I could streamline it.
Yeah.
Like
Things
last
that you said, I should have done this.
yeah,
or we
just
could
there's
have-
ways
yeah,
to make it even faster and
Yeah.
smooth and smoother than
Sure.
what we did last time.
Sure. And I'm sure as it went
Are you
along,
listening, Travis Guillory?
and as you go along, technology comes along more that help it even
Mhm.
better. So
Yeah.
So what's a marketing trend that you think is wildly overrated?
AI. Want to know more? Okay.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Well,
Yeah.
everybody's putting it in every product.
Mhm.
It's driving up the price of consumer electronics. Nobody wants the data centers in their community. It's very expensive to run, and they're not making enough money from users to justify the amount of investment that they're getting in. The whole thing feels like another huge bubble, and it's going to pop. And honestly, one of the things I love about theater is it is the most anti-AI thing you can do. There's no artificial intelligence that goes into a live performance. There's just not.
Yeah.
There's no aspect of it. So if you want the cure to all the AI stuff that you're being inundated with, go see more live theater.
Yep. Go live. There you go.
Specifically, The Diary of Anne Frank, August 14th to the 23rd.
Shameless plug. There you go. Awesome. What's a role that you'd never play again, even for $1 million?
Gosh, I don't know. I can't think of any role that I hated that much.
Okay.
And if you're offering me $1 million to take any role, I would pretty much be available for any genre.
Right? Yeah, of course. Why not? If you could give a TED Talk tomorrow, what would the topic be?
Media literacy,
Very good.
critical media literacy. It's a huge interest of mine. It's something I'm going to be introducing in some of these future shows
Mhm.
with How the F Did We Get Here, because people watch a lot of media today. We're saturated with media,
Yep.
and not enough people think about where it's coming from,
Mhm.
who's producing it, who's paying to produce that media, what messages that media carries, what agenda do these people have
Sure.
that they want to carry out on you with
Yeah.
this media message. And yeah, people should really be more aware of that. And as a kid who grew up in the 70s on television, like a nonstop diet of television, I've been there, done that. I was always fascinated by television and the industry. And that was one of the places I might have taken a career when I was in college. I thought about TV programming and all that. I was really good at it. I was really fascinated by it. And but I've also come to realize that TV is not the most positive technology. It can be.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Sesame Street in the early 70s, and I learned my alphabet entirely.
Yeah.
I learned to read from watching Electric
Sure.
Company. It's got a lot of good to it, but there's a lot of crap out there
Oh, yeah.
driven by a system that's very capitalist and say, well, let's go ahead and run ads for kids, on these cartoon shows, and let's just make the cartoon shows ads while we're at it.
Yeah.
So they'll want those toys, and let's manipulate old people into being scared all the
Right.
time and buying gold and burying it in their backyard and all these other things. It's
Well, the
lot.
reason why, our parents and grandparents called it a boob tube.
Yeah.
It would literally rot your brain.
Yes.
And so where you become subservient to everything.
Yeah.
So, okay, which director, living or dead, would you love to shadow for one day?
Stanley Kubrick, my favorite film director,
Absolutely.
and I think his stuff is endlessly watchable over and over again. You can always find new meaning in his storytelling, his shot choices, his editing. The guy was a master, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree. What's a book that changed how you think about storytelling?
The Road, not Road, the play that I did,
Right.
but The Road by his name escapes me. The guy wrote No Country for Old Men. Cormac McCarthy
Okay.
wrote The Road, which is about a father and a son on their feet trying to get to the coast after some unnamed apocalypse has happened in the world, and people are, there's no society, there's no animals left to eat. It's all and that one, it's written in a style that is very just the boy, the man. They're not named characters. It's very short, almost brutal sentences of description of what's happening. And it made me feel so hard,
Yeah.
about being a father,
Yeah.
and maybe want to be a better father. It was an intense read.
Yeah. turned out to be a fairly decent movie as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
so-
but the book was phenomenal.
Oh, sure.
And it was a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Yeah,
in fact.
very nice. What's one of the most chaotic things to happen, chaotic backstage moments that you've ever survived?
Let me see. There was one show where our music director almost quit like the day before, 2 days before, and we had to talk her down from that ledge. Had one director walk out the night before I had to take over the rest of the directing of the show. I actually stepped into a role when one guy left. This is not in one season, by the way. This is over a 10 to 15 year
One
period.
show? Wow.
But I had this is not one show. I had one show where the lead actor couldn't do it, and he stepped out during Tech Week, like Tuesday of Tech
Oh
Week,
my gosh.
and I ended up grabbing the script and being like, "Show must go on," and I played his role, and it was a big role.
Yeah.
But I had to do it with the script,
Wow.
and you know, there's yeah, there's a million things like that that you just. I mean, during COVID, I was going on stage all the time because sometimes our actor who was cast would get sick, and then we were doing understudies, almost double casting shows, and the understudy or the swing was sick as well, and so the costume fit me, so I was the guy who put it on and would have to go out and do the show.
Okay. What would you say is your most controversial food opinion?
Pineapples do not belong on pizza.
I don't see that that's controversial. I agree with you.
Okay. Let me see. In-N-Out Burger is no better than Whataburger. Whataburger is way more superior to In-N-Out Burger. Sorry, cultists.
Okay, so if you weren't in theater or communications, what alternate life would you be living?
I would love to be. I mentioned I have this thing for media literacy. I would love to be in academia, studying critical media literacy.
Okay.
That is just that's something I've thought about doing sometime in my future life, my last few decades anyway. But I would love to teach people about what I mentioned, how to recognize propaganda messages,
Yeah.
how to recognize when there's an agenda being pushed upon you and what that agenda is and who's paying for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really, really good. So, Jerrod, as we come to the end here, I want to thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Thanks for
Appreciate you
coming up
meeting me.
and meeting little old me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Home of the Brave Productions, how the F did we get here? How did if somebody wants to learn more about it, somebody wants to buy tickets, how do they go about connecting with you?
So you can start with the website, which is howthef.org, which is just kind of the landing place for all the shows that we're going to be doing there. And you can see the upcoming shows that have already been scheduled with ticket links to those. And then you can also find us on Facebook or Instagram. I'm not going to go on X, Twitter. It's a Nazi bar. Get out of here. You know, I'm not going to promote my stuff over there. But I'm on, and I'm not a fan of Meta either.
Well,
but
yeah.
if you want to get your ads out
Yeah.
in a cheap way, you kind of have to go with Meta advertising. So for those of you who are still on Facebook and Instagram, look up Home of the Brave Productions and please follow us there. I have a newsletter where I'm keeping people informed about what's going on with the project every week or two, called From the Producer. They can sign up for that on the howthef.org website.
Okay.
It's just a basic newsletter. You get it once a week. No spam. I'm not going to sell your information. I'm not about that. But I will tell you when upcoming events are happening and how to get tickets.
Okay. So Diary Van Frank, right here at Theater Tulsa in their studios here. You said opens
August 14th.
August
And
14th.
runs for 2 weekends through the 23rd.
Okay. And they can get tickets through the howthef.org.
Yeah, or the Theater Tulsa website.
Okay.
We both have links
We'll-
to the same place.
We'll make sure those links are available on the show notes for this site or for this episode. So you guys be sure and check that out. And if you're anywhere around the Tulsa area during that time, be sure and come and check out the show. So, Jerrod, again, thank you. Appreciate your time. Just filling us in on what's going on. Thank you for the idea of bringing theater community together.
Of course.
I think that's an amazing thing that we should all strive for.
Well, I had all these contacts, and
Absolutely.
I just thought I should use them because I had a hand in building up this community over a 10-year period,
Sure.
and building like the culture here at Theater Tulsa, and making it very inclusive and consent focused in terms of what we ask people to do on stage. And it's like, now that I'm not in charge of that community, I'm still part of it, and I still have all these connections, all these friendships I've made. And so I still want to work with everybody. So that's what's been so fun about this, is not being in charge of everybody's paycheck, but being able to work with these old friends and it's creative. I know so many cool creative people in Tulsa. And that's one thing I love about my time here, is that this community that we have is here, and it's been great for me. And I don't want to just walk away from it just because I have a different job.
So thanks, appreciate it. Thank you for all you do. So we really appreciate that. For everybody else listening at home, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time, whether that be on your drive, work, home, whatever it is. Thank you for just tuning in and giving us just a little slice of your life. If you want to follow us, again, we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can also follow our website, which is oklahomaonstage.org. And if you have any comments or questions, you can email us at oklahomaonstage@gmail.com. Again, thank you for your time. And remember, above all else, what we tell you to do, continue to support the arts.